Okay, so this is the first lesson to help you with the last essay, formal essay we're going to write of the year. And it is on the myths that we've read. You're going to get a choice. There are 3 writing prompts to choose from. You're going to choose one of them to do. So you've read 6 myths. In each myth, there are characters that change as a result of the actions of other characters and events in the stories. Through the characters' changes, lessons are revealed to the audience, who could be the reader or whoever's listening to the myth. So you're going to choose 2 myths and answer one of the following writing prompts. The first one, the myths of Greece and Rome often have similar lessons in them. Choose 2 myths that have a similar lesson and analyze how the lessons are revealed through the development of a character or characters in the myths. So we looked at many lessons in these myths, and you're looking for a similar one in 2 different myths, and you're going to focus on one character in particular who kind of shows that lesson through what happens to them or their actions and responses. Your second choice, the myths of Greece and Rome often have the same gods or goddesses in them. Choose one god or goddess who affects characters in 2 different myths. Analyze how the deity, that's just a general word for god or goddess, so I don't have to keep writing both, affects at least one character in each myth. So we had several gods that show up in multiple myths. Zeus shown up in multiple myths. Hades has shown up in multiple myths. Dionysus has showed up in multiple myths. Apollo has shown up in multiple myths. So you can think about like a god or goddess that in the 2 myths that they show up in, Hera has shown up in 2 myths, that they show up in a character in each myth that god has affected, and analyze how the god does in both myths. In your third one, it's a little similar. The Greek and Roman gods and goddesses often interact with mortals in their myths. Do the gods and goddesses treat the mortals fairly? Choose one god or goddess that affects characters in 2 different myths. Analyze if the god or goddess treats the mortal characters fairly in each myths. So it's similar to this one, only going to take it a step further and analyze whether or not how they affect that character is fair. Okay, so you're going to use details, meaning, in your own words and quotes from each myth to support your answer. Make sure you're introducing your quote with the appropriate anchor or appropriately weave the quote into your analysis, and then cite each quote following MLA guidelines. That would be with the last name of the author and a page number. So in order to help you with this, you're going to complete a brainstorming sheet. There's a different one for each writing prompt because each one is a little different in terms of organization and focus. So this is for writing prompt 1, the lesson. So if you're going to look at lessons in 2 myths, right, it just kind of walks you through which 2 myths you're going to use, what's the lesson you're going to focus on in each myth, then the title of the first myth and which character best revealed that lesson. So this is step 3. So you're going to focus on the first myth in step 3. And then A walks you through the organization of how we learn the lesson. So describe how the characters at the beginning, highlight a quote that supports your description of the character, number at quote 1. Describe events that cause the character to change, highlight a quote and number that quote 2. Describe the character at the end, how has the character been changed because of events, and then highlight a quote and number at quote 3. And then how does this change reveal the lesson? So what's the lesson learned or not learned? Maybe the character didn't learn a lesson, but we as the audience do because something bad happened to that character, right? So how do we learn? Because, Orpheus didn't make it. Okay, and then we are going to do the same thing for the second myth. So that would be step 4. What's the second myth? Which character are you going to focus on? And then describe the character at the beginning, find a quote, number the quote, describe events that cause the character to change. Again, number the quote, find the quote, number it, and then describe the character at the end of the story. How's the character been changed because of events? Find a quote that supports that and number it. And then again, how are the changes? How's the lesson revealed to the audience? Because the character was successful or because the character wasn't successful? If you are doing writing prompt 2, Then you would think about which god or goddess you want to use, which myth and which character was affected, and then the same in 2. Again, deity is just another word for god or goddess. So I don't have to say god or goddess, right? Deities could be either. And then we're going to analyze the first myth, so the title of your first myth, right? And then describe the action. Find a quote that supports that and highlight it. Describe the character's response to the action, and then find a quote and highlight that. Explain the long-term effects on the mortal character or others because of the deity's actions. Find a quote and highlight that, and then highlight a quote that supports your explanation of the long-term effects. And then what lesson does the reader or audience learn from the effects of the god's or goddess's actions, right? So, what's the message to the reader because of what happened? And I know I say mortal character here, but, I'm thinking particularly about Origin of the Seasons. If you wanted to say, because in that one it's all gods or goddesses, if you wanted to use that myth, that would be acceptable. You could do that and just say how the god affected the other characters in the myth. Would be nice in terms of the long-term effects if you could think about how that played out for the mortals involved. But you could certainly use that myth. And then again, for the second myth, you're going to go through the same thing. This is really, both of these are very similar to what we've done in terms of journal entries. So the organization should start, hopefully, to feel a little familiar to you. And then with writing prompt 3, it's very similar. Again, which god or goddess, which character is affected, but then you have to think about whether or not the treatment was fair, right? And then that will be the big piece in the end, is analyzing that. So again, you're going to go through, and it's very similar to what I just described. What did the god or goddess do? How did the character respond? What was the long-term effects? Finding quotes along the way and numbering them in the myth so that you can put them in your final essay. And then, this is different though, like why are the deity's actions fair or unfair? And make sure you say why they're fair or unfair. And then again, for the second myth, going through the same process. We are going to turn these into your paragraphs. This does not have to be a complete sentence. When you turn it into a paragraph, though, it should be, right? So first, Zeus agreed to let Hades marry Persephone, right? It should be a nice, complete sentence, clearly identifying that's the action of the god or goddess, the character's response. And you're going to put your quotes in the middle between these, right? I'm not making you write out the quote right now. I'm just having you number it, but you should be aware that you'll be putting in the paragraph, you'll be writing the quotes in and numbering them. If you have any questions, please let me know. Again, you're only filling out one of these depending on which writing prompt you're going to do, but it would be a good idea to get it filled out completely before we start writing so that when we get to the library, you can just go ahead and start typing. You don't have to think about this part of it.